You're listening to WLPNLP 105.5 FM Lumpen Radio, Bridgeport, Chicago. It's November 9th, 2017, and you're listening to the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable.
Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.
Hello, and welcome to the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. I am your host, Chris Quinn, coming to you once again from Studio B here in the Co-Prosperity Sphere in Bridgeport, Chicago. Thanks as always to Lumpen Radio and its many fearless leaders, primarily Logan Bay, but I do have to give a shout out to producer John for nailing the opening. I have a feeling that a couple weeks ago he was so upset with how much he botched the opening that he decided not to archive the show in hopes that no one would ever hear it. So I'm doing my duty here. It's not that I want to, but I feel I owe it to you guys, the listeners, to let you know that 2 weeks ago producer John did in fact not nail the opening, but he did this week. And so there you go. So thanks to producer John, one of the many fearless leaders here. If you are listening live, thank you for tuning in to 105.5 FM. And if you are listening on the airwaves, literally on a radio, I think they exist. They exist in cars, definitely. But I know Kate was actually listening on an old Panasonic radio a couple weeks ago, so I guess at least one still exists. So thank you to you guys listening on the radio. If you're probably more likely these days listening via the Lumpen Radio app or TuneIn Radio or something like that, you are also essentially listening live, and you can join in the live chat, which is at tlk.io/WLPN. You can check that out there and join in the conversation and, essentially just make fun of me and the rest of the guests for whatever we're saying that's inaccurate or, whatever. You guys don't need my help in figuring out what to make fun of me for. I've looked at the chat transcripts. So for those of you who aren't listening live, thank you as well for listening via iTunes and stuff like that. We always appreciate it. And for those of you listening to for the first time, I like to just give a little spiel at the beginning to tell you a little bit about what to expect. Essentially, the goal of the show is to open up a window into how the people making, selling, marketing, and facilitating the beer getting into your glass feel about the topics that are a part of their everyday lives. Many of my greatest beer experiences have been talking about beer while sharing beers with people whose opinions I respect and admire. And it's these experiences that I hope to capture with the Insiders Roundtable. And there are definitely some people whose opinions I respect and admire this evening. So I'm looking forward to it. But I have to say something about these people's opinions. These people whom I respect and admire, but their opinions, is that their own opinions. They're not the opinions of any entity that they may be associated with. Definitely not the opinions of Lumpen Radio, and definitely not the opinions of really anything, a Beer Temple, anything. So that said, thanks again, guys, for joining in, and thanks to my guests here, and we'll get it started. I think we've got two long-standing regulars here, so we always introduce guests. Well, I try to. It's getting more difficult now because I don't really keep an actual tabulation on how often people are on. But I introduce guests in order of seniority based on how often they've been on. Steve, I think you still probably have the nod, Mr. Steve Masney. How are you?
I am very well. I just got back from Minneapolis, the Midwest Bridge Preservation Partnership Conference. A lot of fun. There's a lot of
Good
bridges in the day,
alliteration too. Yeah.
yeah, and a lot of beer in the evening, and then after drinking beer, if you're still up for anything, you can go wander around and look at bridges.
Look at bridges. Yeah.
So I had some Mississippi mud on my boots right now.
Not the beer.
No, the actual literal mud.
Actual Mississippi mud.
From just downstream of St. Anthony Falls, which I didn't realize, only waterfall on the Mississippi River. It was first seen by a European in 1680, apparently, which was Hennepin, Father Hennepin. So the Ommegang beer is named after him.
I was waiting I knew there would be a beer tie-in. I was just waiting for it. There you go. Very cool. What else is new? How was Minnesota?
I went to Surly, and I've been wanting to go there since I think around 2012 when they announced that they were building this big new place. And I was wondering, I'm like, why didn't I not go there when I was up there in early 2014? I went up and took my BJCP tasting exam up there, and turns out it wasn't open then, so I at least had a good reason that I didn't go.
That's why you didn't go.
They opened in apparently late 2014, and that place is awesome. Like, I go to a lot of beer places with some regularity, and there was, I don't know, 25 or 30 beers, all of which were at least very good, if not better than that. The first beer I ordered was the Pils, and it was so very good, and it was the right order apparently, because after drinking like 20 of the different beers, I was there with a bunch of different people, and we were all sharing. The Pils continued to be the best one, although there were others that were close. And
it was just called Surly Pils.
Yeah, and the service was like, every once in a while, like there was a place called Vinny's Pizza Pub in Arkansas that I stopped by like late one Saturday or Sunday evening, and they like stayed open and served me, and they were like super cool. And Surly was on that order, but there was like 200 people in the room, and the service was incredible. Like it's unusual, I think, to have your expectations exceeded. People are always saying, "Did I exceed your expectations?" You're like, "Well, no." Like
you met
them, like, which is what
fine.
I wanted.
Yeah.
And this was well above what I thought it would be. I thought it was going to be great, and it was substantially better than that.
That's awesome.
So,
well, hey, cheers to Surly there. Very cool. Well, thanks for coming on and telling me about.
It is always a pleasure.
The Bridge Conference and the excellent service at Surly and all sorts of stuff.
Making sure they all still stand up.
Yes. My next guest is, my other guest is Mr. Doug Valicki of Revolution Brewing, and also of Beer Aficionado fame, and I'm sure some other stuff too. How are you, Doug?
Doing great. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to have you on. What's new with you?
I was in Pittsburgh last weekend just visiting my parents. Didn't really do anything beer related other than take a few of our new barrel-aged beers home with me. I have a lot of high school and college friends that live in the area, so none of them have ever had a barrel-aged beer in their life, so it was fun to get to give them some Death Star and beers like that.
How did it go?
It went well. They're all bourbon drinkers, so they were quick to adapt to it. Even though they hadn't had anything like it, they got it and really dug it. So that was fun. Lots going on at the brewery right now. We just finished getting the first round of our barrel-aged beers in cans, and that went well. It's all on our new filler, which just came in a couple weeks ago. We're really excited about that. It was a big investment for us. And
was that different from a canner, or is a canner and a filler same thing?
Same thing. Okay. You have the filler and then the seamer, and it's all one. It's both of those are new for us.
Is this the first new one since you opened that facility?
Yeah, exactly. The one we had been running was 30-some years old. It worked great for us, but the quality we can get to with this new one and the TPO levels, the DO out of the can, that was the biggest motivator for wanting to do barrel-aged beers in the cans was the quality. If we're investing in this machine that can take care of the beer so well, why put it in the bottles out of our Maheen, which is on the opposite end of the spectrum? That was kind of like for when we were a lot smaller, and so we thought we'd do a better favor for the beer, as well as wanting to get into the smaller serving sizes and all that. But the quality we can get on the canner,
Do you mind talking a little bit about what you're hoping to hit with, or what this machine you're hoping is capable of doing in terms of dissolved oxygen, aka DO?
It's getting us to like 15 for those familiar, whereas the old one would be significantly higher than that. And it helps the beer travel well too. It's great for a barrel aged beer, but also for our hop forward beers that are going to other states. It keeps that crisp hop flavor for significantly longer. The lower you can keep the lower you can keep the.
And it's
TBO
online
levels.
now.
Yeah, it couldn't have gone smoother. We had maybe.
I'm not going to wood for you.
We had like 4 days of downtime, and we were anticipating a little bit more than that, and it got running right away.
So I have a question. You talk about the lower serving size, and something that we've talked about occasionally is like little 7-ounce nips, and occasionally you see tiny cans packaged here and there. Like, do you have to buy a completely special machine to do that, or do they make some packaging lines that fill 16-ounce and 12-ounce and can go up and down and everything like that?
It can depend. I think for us, it's a lot easier if the mouth of the can stays the same. So I think like we could have done those 9-ounce stubby cans because the mouth is the same as a 12-ounce can. We could have done 16. We're now.
But like a Red Bull can would be more difficult.
Yeah, and it's not that we can't do it, but it would take more significant adjustments that you have to go back and forth, and then the next day you're canning something different. It's kind of a pain, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So. Well, thanks for coming on, and you brought some.
I did. I brought the coffee version, Cafe Death.
Nice. And I have to say also thank you and the folks at Rev for the Coffee Eugene cask that you guys sent over. That beer, we just had I had some of that today, and man, that beer is drinking very well. So thank you guys.
In June, I told someone at your bar this story last night. I think it was Brittany, and I said in June, I wanted Coffee Eugene to happen so bad. We hadn't made it in 2 years, and it was just a brew pub beer, draft only beer in the past, and I put together this big presentation of why we should do a can release with it to try it out. It had 20 different pros and very few cons, and barely anybody even read it. They were just like, okay, we'll do it. And I was like, so I probably didn't need to go through all that effort, but I was a big proponent of getting that Coffee Eugene made, so I'm glad you like it.
Well, it's also good for you to be sure that you're sure, just extra sure. So cool. And my final guest, certainly not least, but last at least this time, is Mr. Michael Roper of The Hop Leaf. How are you?
Good.
Mr. Roper, what's new?
So I recently returned from a European trip, which included 8 days in Belgium.
Oh, awesome.
And, there's a ton of stuff going on there. It seems like almost every brewery is in a big expansion mode. And it's kind of a good thing, but what's happening is like the old, these old historic breweries are making their old brew houses into museums. And when you really look at it, you can see they kind of had to do it because I don't know how, when you look at some of the equipment, I was at St. Bernardus, I was at Bone, I was at Von Hanselbruck, and you look at this equipment and you do go, how did they make any beer that was even drinkable out of this equipment? I mean, everything about it. There's so many opportunities for bad things to happen at every stage of the brewing process. So, it's a tribute to the brewmasters that they somehow pulled this off. But, they're selling a lot more beer now. And to make the beers in the quantities that they're making right now, these old breweries were just, they had to go. Von Hanselbruck in particular, their new brewery is huge. And they didn't, unlike some of the other ones who sort of expanded on existing facilities or put a building next door, their new brew house is probably 4 or 5 miles away. It's sort of like out in a farm field someplace. They just bought a hunk of land and built a brewery that, by any standard, would be big. It's really big.
Oh yeah.
And I don't, you don't really see Castile beers around that much.
Yeah.
But apparently, all Belgian beer has found a very good market in China, in Japan, in
Good.
other markets. For many of the breweries, their number one market after Belgium is France. And that's because France is like the poor stepchild of the craft beer industry. Pretty much every country, including countries like Greece, now have a lively craft beer scene. Not France.
Yeah.
It's just not happening there.
There's a little. I mean,
A little bit, but it's really small compared to virtually everybody else.
that's perhaps fair, but I have at least one French craft beer enthusiast friend would take exception to saying that there is no scene there.
There is a scene, but it is remarkably small relative to what's going on in the rest of Europe.
So Steve and I are going to be going to Belgium in a
few weeks.
Yeah. Anything that it was a can't miss?
I think you should check out the Brussels Beer Project. It's basically it's sort of almost an American-style storefront brewery, and doing a lot of experimental stuff. One that is not tied to tradition in any way. And it's a really great place to visit, to just sit around and drink, but also kind of see what they're doing, chat with them, chat with the people who come by. It's a concept that is a little new for Belgium in general, that they are trying to spread around Europe. So they actually have already opened a second location in Paris. So maybe they saw an opportunity there
Could be.
to do something. But I would definitely go there. If you can get to, everybody likes to go to Alembic Brewery when you're there. We went to Bone. And
Yeah, we're going to be hitting many Lambic breweries.
Bone has done some significant and interesting modernization, they kept their original coolship, but they have integrated it into a more modern brew house, and they're doing really great stuff there. If Frank is around, he can walk you through it, and it's really awesome.
Awesome. I am very much looking forward to doing just that. I will say, Doug just handed me a can, and I poured myself some of the Cafe Death. And it's not Cafe Death, it's Cafe Death?
It can go either way.
Okay. So this smells a lot to me like the very first time I ever had Bourbon County coffee, the first year, but it's got this like chocolate or this coffee ice cream aroma to it. There's like so much like nougat and caramel in there as well. I haven't tasted it yet, but it smells outrageously good. So
It's in this can, with a black top, like all black, including the tab and everything, like a matte black, and then you pour it, and it's like it's just very,
oil.
very, very dark.
Motor oil.
It's fun. It's definitely aesthetically pleasing. Yeah, I see that you had to go with the shrink wrap around the outside of the can because you're not doing high enough runs, presumably, to...
So we're doing 8 cans, and the regular Death Star is printed, and then the other 7 are shrink wrapped.
Got it.
Good observation.
what about Death Star?
That's the one
I'm
that's...
joking. I was just being a jerk. Yeah, well, thanks for bringing this. This is great. Are they all seeing distro, or some of them seeing...
Just some of them.
Just
And,
some
yeah,
of them.
We're going to figure it all out after the release parties, but at least a couple of them will.
Awesome.
Oh, so we're drinking pre-release cafe, huh?
Yeah, next Friday and Saturday.
Contraband.
I'll
I
say
guess
that.
it's because we're insiders.
Yep.
Exactly.
Nice.
So why don't we just kind of parlay this into beers that we've been excited to have been drinking lately or are looking forward to drinking. Steve, you wanna start or?
For me, it was that Surly Pills. But I will say that I also had the Surly Hell, which often in the package is somewhat lackluster, and man, was it good at the brewery. I mean, it just, sometimes you go to a brewery and you're like, wow, this is great how good the beers taste here, but it was something else there. And that's going to be the case to some extent at any brewery, but the liveliness on the Hell, the delicate hops and the just like real nice malt and easy drinking, and if you like beer and someone gave that to you and you didn't like it, I would be utterly shocked.
Very cool. For me, we had this big barrel aged event at the store and slash bar yesterday, and it's funny. It's like kind of exceeding expectations, like you were talking about before, Steve. There were so many beers that I had such high expectations for that. Meeting them meant that it was a really, really good beer. But there was one beer from Avery. It was a Cabernet Sauvignon barrel-aged sour called, I think it's Amicitia. It's one of the beers that it's like a single barrel release that they do, or single barrel project. Man, was it well put together. It reminds me of like a Russian River sour, maybe something along like in between like a supplication and a consecration. It was unfruited, but the fruit character from the Cabernet Sauvignon barrels was just really intense and just very, very good. And the wineries they got their barrels from were no slouches. I know it was two of them. One of which was Chateau Montelena, which is I don't know how they kind of are famous, very well known winery in Napa Valley, and it was very, very good stuff. So I was very pleasantly surprised by a beer that I figured was going to be good, but didn't think it was going to be one of the better sours I can remember having this year. So very, very good stuff there. Who wants to go next? Anyone?
I'll go next.
Okay.
And I'm really anxious because we're doing an Avery event, and I have several of their barrel-aged beers.
Great.
And I haven't tasted them yet, so now I have this great excitement that I maybe didn't have.
Yeah, they're not cheap. They are not cheap barrels.
No. I had the number 7 of the Luponic Distortions from Firestone Walker today, which is the New Zealand hop one. So we still have the number 6 on tap, which is the one of all Michigan hops. Mm-hmm. And every one of these is really good. I mean,
yes.
They're really great. And the New Zealand one was just so fresh. The aromatics were really beautiful. And, it kind of speaks to, their canning too. And, I think that the bottle doesn't hold that in like the cans do. I felt like I was running through a hop field, and, it was just fantastic. And, Matt at Firestone, he's like the master of balance. I mean, you can make a hop bomb that might excite some people, but this is really easy drinking and just beautiful. So I really I think that's the beer that I would have to say is exciting me the most right now. So we'll be getting that on tap soon too. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, Matt Brynildson is a master of hops.
He's our owner, Josh, and our brewmaster, Jim. He's their mentor. Jim used to work for Matt, and so they model a lot of their beers after pretty much everything they learned from Matt.
So, he's a nice guy, too.
Oh, yeah.
And 60% of the beer he makes is 805.
That's right, which is their kind of just pale.
It's pretty good.
Golden Ale?
Golden Ale, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's funny. So talking about how hops or I think specifically you were talking about hops, Michael, taste better or seem to just hold up better in the can versus the bottle. It's interesting. I've done a couple blind tastings of the same beer within like 48 hours of packaging between the two, bottle and can, and the can does seem to hold up better. I've even had times where older cans hold up better than bottles and stuff, and who knows why. The funny thing is, this is just it's certainly not a scientific study or an adequate sample size, just in my blind tasting anecdotal experience. The question I have is, so I know cans are, and we've talked about this before here on the show, but cans are hermetically sealed, so no oxygen is getting in once it's sealed, where bottles are not. There is a slow transfer of oxygen into the bottle through the cap, or the space between the cap and the bottle, I should say. But they start out with lower DO than a can, and from what I've heard, it's because you can't really counter pressure fill a can, and that's just where you're going to let more oxygen in. Well, apparently, I've heard they are working on a way to do that, and they will be doing it.
If you make your can bottle shaped, then that would help solve that issue. Which, I mean, the big guys have that. But I mean, the reason that I was kind of making faces at you about cans versus bottles is because probably most breweries that are doing both, their bottling line is older than their canning line, so the canning line is probably doing a better job. I mean, Doug was just talking about Revolution, and I think most breweries that have installed a canning line in the last 10 years, they invested a lot of money in that after they invested some amount of money in the original bottling line. So,
what about, then I should try it with like Sierra Nevada Pale Ale that is coming out of from the East Coast, out of North Carolina. Yeah, presumably those are both brought up.
If they put them both in at the same time, it would be interesting to do it. Run the trial a few times, come to conclusions, and then write to them or invite them onto the show and be like, "So, what are the actual numbers on your lines? Because this is what we tasted." That would be a great experiment.
All right, let's do it.
I think that I was actually talking about this topic recently at a seminar, and if you're going to have a beer in a bottle to put down, it's hard to put a can down for a long time because the coating does have a life where the coating starts to break down.
The coating on the inside of the can.
Inside of the can. Yeah. It breaks down. Like the manufacturers of the cans say that it's got...
they guarantee it for a year, usually.
Yeah.
It'll go plenty farther, but that's what they're willing to put.
I think they were talking 18 months. So we have some beers that we put down longer. So I would probably stick to glass in that case. But in many other ways, while cans are, I always call them an inelegant serving vessel, they do protect the beer better.
In another kind of anecdotal, I think I had some... It was some type of special gas station or liquor store beer from St. Louis. It was called 609 or something like that. It was an area code beer, and it was from the late 80s or the early 90s. Someone had a case of this stuff. It looked like...
Wait, recently?
Yeah, like within the last year or so.
And it had been sitting there for decades?
It had been in a person's basement, unopened in this case for decades.
This person meaning this store?
No, like it was a liquor store brand beer that someone had purchased, stuck in the basement. Like the reason that it wound up at this party was that one of the guys at this party goes around, and when people die and the estate is trying to value things, he goes and looks at people's whiskey cellars and decides like how much things are worth. And this case of unopened liquor store beer, just light lager was sitting there. And they're like, how much is this worth? He's like, it's going to be nothing. And they're like, well, why don't you just take it? And he's like, all right. So we brought it to a party, and we were like shotgunning these things and stuff. But when he said that the stuff was like 25 years old, I didn't believe him. I was like, "What? You're full of crap," And then he's like, "No, really." And I'm like looking at the packaging. I'm like, that kind of, and I like do a little research, and like this stuff hasn't been produced and it tasted like it was been in the can for 6 months. Like, so whoever that brewmaster was or packager, like my hat is off to him because it tasted fine. It tasted like mackerel lager. It wasn't great, but it was okay.
And it hadn't completely just broken apart.
Nope.
Okay.
Tasted fine.
All right.
Like, I mean, I tasted it and just thought it was okay. Yeah, it's just the beer was shotgunning.
Well,
and
Doug,
then found out it was old, and I was like, wow.
Doug, the bar has been set by this liquor store brand.
I've got the cans in my garage still, so I can tell you the exact brand if you need to know it.
We will need to know because in 25 years we're going to
open some
drink
Cafe
it
Deep
and then see if, to your memory, it tastes as good as that beer did 25 years ago when you had it. So it'll have been, So get ready. It's going to be a mental exercise for you. You have 25 years to prepare. That's the good news. Cool. Doug?
We launched the Indianapolis market at the beginning of October, and I went on my first crew drive where we send a bunch of the mostly people from the sales team to go out there for a week and partner up with the distributors and go around and introduce yourselves to accounts and teach your distributor about the brand and how to talk about the brand and everything.
And I have to interrupt you. I apologize, but I have to mention to everyone out there that they're listening to WLPNLP 105.5 FM Chicago. How you like that, John? Didn't even need to be prompted. And back to you. Back to you, Doug.
Sure. So didn't have time to visit any breweries, even though there were a bunch I wanted to visit. But we drove past this one that I'd had a few beers from called Daredevil, and they're right along the Speedway, like where the Indianapolis Speedway is. There's this brand new strip of bars and restaurants, really nice. And I saw the brewery, and it was at the end of the day, so. The guy I was riding along with our distributor, he took me in, and the owner happened to be there and did a real quick 15-minute tour, had some of their beers, and I'd seen their IPA on tap everywhere, and had ordered it at dinner a bunch of times, and man, was it good! And it kind of reminded me of Half Acres Vallejo, but it's their year round. It was that style of IPA, but then they do. They play around with it a lot with these specialty release cans, not dissimilar from what a lot of breweries do, but they take their base IPA and then they hit it with a second dry hop of a different hop, and a lot of them are, exotic or new ones. So I had the Galaxy one there, and then when I told an Indianapolis friend about it, he sent me their latest one, which was hopped with a newer hop called Denali. And it's one that we're starting to work with at Revolution, and have one of our next new beers coming out is featuring that hop. And I really liked it, and it just kind of got me thinking. I go back and forth whether I like the hazy double dry hop beers, and sometimes I feel like I hate them, but I always find myself drinking them and seeking them out. And this beer, this Denali dry hopped, double dry hopped Liftoff, which is their flagship IPA. To me, I love exploring hops and getting to know these new ones, and I feel like some of these, aggressively double dry hop beers, they kind of help you. It's like kind of the tasting equivalent of using a magnifying glass, and it lets you, because it's just so intense. Yes. It lets you really learn about what flavors are coming precisely from the hop versus anything else to do with the beer. And then when you have a more balanced version with that same hop, it can kind of prepare you for detecting that flavor and getting to know a little better. And I think that's one thing I like about them. I love having one of a lot of these, but I rarely drink a whole 6-pack of them. But I love trying them, and it's kind of helped educate me on a lot of the new hops that are coming out that are being used in these beers, and being able to differentiate between them.
What they taste like. That's interesting. I tend to think that that's one of the reasons that people like these beers these craft beers in general, where a certain flavor or ingredient is, I'll say, exaggerated, certainly kind of blown out of balance. Mm-hmm. Maybe to good effect, like you were saying, is because I think drinkers like to be able to identify what they're drinking. They like to have that understanding, that knowledge of what it is, which is why if they like hops, a lot of times they want it to be the hoppiest thing in the world, or have the most barrel character, or the most maple, or the most, maybe certain yeast profile or something like that, is because, or, certainly the most sour, is because they know what it is and they like that they can identify it, and then they can tell if it's, if there's more of it, maybe they equate that to better. But and again, I've talked about that several times, on the show before. But I do think it's interesting that you can, a lot of these smaller breweries are taking certain cannings, certain versions of these beers, and exploring various hops with it. It is a great way to figure out some of these new hops. There's so many new hops too. I feel there's so many of them out there. So this was Denali, you said?
Yep.
Denali hop? I had an Idaho 7 hop beer from Pipeworks called Dead Inside. That, man, it was excellent. I really liked it.
Hop Butcher had one a few months ago too. The one that had the picture of I think it was called Too Flat.
Yeah.
I think that had Idaho 7 in it.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah. I just liked it. I also liked
what
it.
are these hops along the lines of? Like, what is an Idaho 7 like a Citra or a Centennial, or like what's it kind of like?
To me, it kind of was a little mosaic-y. You know how mosaic can get a little bit of that kind of green onion, chivy thing to it? It definitely had hints of that, but maybe a little bit more, quote-unquote dank as well. So It had a lot of that kind of marijuana meets oniony, garlicky is it how it goes in excess, but I'll say chivy, herbal.
But it was easy on the cat pee.
You see, I've never had cats, and that is one thing that I really don't pick up, or I identify it as something different because I don't really know.
You don't identify with that.
I don't know what that smells
like. There was
a
extra Citra beer at Surly that a friend ordered it, and I said, yeah, it's kind of smells like cat pee. She smells it. I don't think I said cat pee. It's kind of catty. And then she smells it. She's like, yeah. And she's a cat owner, So.
Okay. Yeah. I sometimes I get like BO from
there's some gym socks
from Citra sometimes.
Always pleasant.
Yes, always pleasant. In a good way.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting. I'm thinking, this conversation just made me think of something that is very analogous to the wine world in these very minor blending grapes that people blend into Cabernet Sauvignon or to Syrah or to Sangiovese. Like sometimes when you look at a wine label, you'll see something like 3% Caniolo, and you go, how can we even taste 3% of this other grape? But if you had 100% Sangiovese and then one with 3% Caniolo, it's like day and night. And it's like now it's the same kind of thing that we're doing with hops and taking a base beer and, either a blend of different hops or one new hop. It's a way of like really identifying that flavor profile in a way you could never do before. It's really interesting.
And I think to kind of reference the brewery you were talking about earlier, Firestone Walker is, in my mind, the best right now at blending hops, at least the best that I know of. I mean, just being able to take different hops and kind of making the whole greater than the sum of its parts. And I really hope that kind of art form, or whatever you want to call it, continues to kind of thrive. And I mean, it's great to be able to like, oh, here's this new hop. We're just going to take a lot of it and shove it into this beer, which is cool, which is nice. But I have a feeling like with, certainly with wines, I tend to like blends more. Sometimes that's not the case. I mean, give me a Burgundy and I will not complain. But even then, I'm sure they're doing some blending, but of different parcels and types of grapes and stuff like that. But with when we were in right near the Welsh border in England, Steve, we had a great experience going to a cidery. It was called Ross on Wye, and we had a live blending demonstration where he was just opening up his casks and showing us, well, this is what a bittersweet tastes like, and this is what a tannic tastes like, and
here's a bitter sharp.
Here's a bitter sharp, and it was funny. Like, he gave us the most sour one at one point, and all three of us there were like, oh, this one's the best. And he's like, wait, hold on, and he took our cup. And he would take another cup and literally dunk it into the barrel and then pour a splash or two into it, which was like a bittersweet or a bitter sharp or something. And he's like, now taste it. There's a little bit of sweetness to it, but it actually is going to enhance and balance the tartness. And we all were like, it actually is better with a little sweetness. And he's like, now let me throw a little bit of tannin into this. And he just would take some and add some, and he would just build this blend. And it was eye-opening how, like, yes, it's a great flavor, but can actually be enhanced by adding things to it. And he was saying with ciders that the blends are, without a doubt, always and almost without exception, better. He said there are examples of certain varietals that can stand on their own, but even then, if you put a single varietal in a real kind of like English cider competition against blends, it doesn't really stand a chance because it doesn't have that ability to have that kind of building foundation of complexity.
I had forgotten about that. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
and
it was a late night, if I remember.
That it was. It reminds me actually of the perfume industry. My sister, for whatever reason, took a deep dive, and in the perfume realm, they will use essences of like things that are rotting and use them in very small amounts, 0.5% or 1%, and it has a major enhancing effect on the overall just blend of fragrances. And you wouldn't use it in a high amount, but in a small amount, these like horrendous smells enhance the whole thing.
That's wild.
And it's that's just Michael's comments about a 3% of this kind of unusual grape making a huge difference. I mean, to purposely put in something that is described as like rotting flesh into a perfume, it doesn't seem like it would make a lot of sense, but this is how it's done, and it.
I wonder if that's some sort of. We're getting off topic here, but I wonder if that's something like very primal in us, in that it registers to us that like, quick, eat this. It's starting to go. Now is the time to get it. So it seems more attractive to us to get us to eat it before it gets worse and we get sick from it. I don't know. That's just, what? Let's just call that fact because I said it.
Well,
so
I mean, the beer has already turned, right? So
it's called a hot take right there. Yeah. I think it's about time that we take a little bit of a break. Let's think we can do both at once. I mean, we're so late for a station ID. Why don't we take a music break and a station ID, and who knows, maybe we'll take another short break later. But just having some good conversation. Why don't you guys listen to some tunes, and you can hear about some of the other shows that are here on Lumpen Radio, and then we'll be back, and you can listen to more of us on the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. Welcome back to the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. I'm your host, Chris Quinn, and I am joined by Doug Valicki, Steve Mastny, and Michael Roper. And we kind of just, went off on some tangents. They were mildly beer-related most of the time, I think. But our first topic is also mildly beer-related. It was something that I was just talking to somebody in a wine shop the other day, and I just kind of came to a decision that I think Amazon has won the online liquor sales game. I think it's going to continue to grow, but I think Amazon's positioning is so dominant that I think in a lot of ways that they're going to be very hard to beat, and I could see them being kind of just like a de facto choice for a lot of things. So they just started to offer delivery to Illinois recently, and if this were to happen, Amazon would become a huge influencer in just beer trends and beer sales and everything. So I wanted to kind of go two ways with this. I wanted to talk about, what that could mean for beer overall if you had one dominant retailer in a certain space anyway. And that doesn't necessarily, that's beer delivery, online beer sales, even if it's remote. The reason I say it is now with the sale of Whole Foods. So they have retailers in, I think Whole Foods is in like 35 or 40 states or something like that. So you could put in an order if you wanted to send it somewhere else, and they can fill it in state totally legally. There's no cross state line issues. They'll fulfill it from the local Whole Foods, and it's done and done. I think with wine, it's especially a no-brainer. I think beer, it becomes a little bit more difficult, but those Amazon people, they're pretty smart. So I don't know. That was kind of the one side of things. I wanted to see how you guys felt, if you felt one way or another about that concept. And the other is was something that was in Brewbound, which was in part of this Marketers Insight seminar, where they were talking about how, in a world where Amazon,
I was hoping you would do that.
Yeah, is they're saying it could be as much as in what could it be, like 10% or something like that.
They were saying 10% in 2025. 10% could be online beer sales.
Sure. So, and let's say that online beer sales, the vast majority of it is Amazon. I mean, that's a huge retailer. Let's say they're doing half of that. So 5% of all beer sales are going through one retailer?
That's off-premise, which is, it's still a very big chunk of the market. But it's not all beer sales.
It's still huge.
And it's also speculative, but take it as a baseline.
Come on, man. I mean, this is what the
They're
show...
likely-
You know what show you're on? This is all speculative. No, I'm kidding.
I think they're likely to do better than we think.
And that's the other thing. I think they're likely to do better than we think.
So Amazon, I am an Amazon customer. I purchase various things
Is there
from
anyone
them.
who isn't? Yeah.
Me.
And
Good for you.
so I have not yet heard that they are selling beer. Maybe, out in the suburbs they're not, or maybe they are, and I just haven't been paying attention. But has anyone here actually purchased or at least looked at how the purchase of beer works on Amazon?
I haven't.
It does seem like having a network of grocery stores would be highly helpful, because one of the biggest problems is that beer is really heavy and it's expensive to ship heavy things. So if they've already got these places that they're shipping stuff to, and then they're just doing like a last mile kind of a thing, that would solve some of that problem.
I mean, logistically, I think they're probably as good, or they're probably better than anyone in that game. And essentially, certainly for retail, door-to-door stuff. And, the legal hurdle, I think, is what they've just kind of circumvented. I mean, they're already within a state, shipping stuff around is not that big a deal. And
Right. Although they still have to, so the brewer sells it to a distributor who sells it to, Whole Foods or Amazon or whatever. So what they really would like to do is be able to just go directly to the brewer, which I don't know that the brewer necessarily is against that either, because maybe the brewer gets a little bit more margin, the retailer gets more margin. It's the distributors who are, really going to be hurting in that equation, and
that would be an epic fight, the wholesalers versus Amazon, because the wholesalers lobby has a lot of money.
yeah, and so I'm sure that there are beer distributors listening, and beer distributors definitely do add value. The question is, do they add enough value to justify their existence without the legal need for them to be there? And I think the answer is that some do and some do not. And it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
My fear is the the effect that they will have on neighborhood beer stores. I don't want to see them go away like bookstores, like clothing stores, like shoe stores.
Like anything non-service based.
They're going away
Yep.
because Amazon just like annihilates them. And it is another way in which Amazon removes human contact. And, when I go to a beer store or a wine shop, I go to one that they know me. And, I like that contact. And I would hate to lose that because the store can't compete. The margins are great in, selling retail, selling beer retail. And if you lose 10% or 15% or 20%,
Oh, you're done.
it could be the end. And the corner beer store, that where someone makes a very curated choice that's based on his or her knowledge of the neighborhood and his or her knowledge of the customers who come in, I really don't want to see that go away. I'm terrified of it because Amazon has not. Every type of product that they've tried to sell, they have won.
Yeah. I mean, more or less, I would say. I mean, I'm sure there's somebody out there who's got an example of one where they haven't and they kind of gave up for now. But I tend to agree, and that's something that I've maybe even talked about again on this show. But it is something that I've been thinking about more. Is people talk about how convenient Amazon is and how great it is, and it's a one-stop shop. And I've had this debate with you, Steve, in our personal lives. How it is something that needs to be thought about and weighed. Is this quote unquote convenience worth the inability to now drive down the street whenever you want and pick up something? Because there are no small hardware, and this is also Home Depot. It's not just Amazon, but
Right.
It's this same idea. An electronics store, small electronics, or like a Radio Shack or something like that. Like there are no Radio Shacks anymore, probably for many reasons. But one of them is because you can just get it sent to you. But now you can't just go to a store and get something if you want it right now. I want to have this in my hand in 10 minutes. Because I need it. Now I have to see, is it available for Amazon now? Is it available for next day? Is it Prime? Oh, wait, it's not Prime. It's just one of the preferred vendors and this and that. And it's like, that. So your choice in some ways is expanding. And in other ways, it's shrinking at the expense of also local business. So those people are going out of business. And other jobs, Amazon is creating, great jobs somewhere else, I'm sure.
That even affects on-premise. Because it reduces the amount of foot traffic on the street. It gives people another reason to just not go out the door. They can,
2 hours. They can have a 6-pack in 2 hours.
They can have a 6-pack. They can order their food on Grubhub. One of the things I've been talking about a lot lately is how, in most of my lifetime, I really depended on going to a local tavern or a corner coffee shop or something for human contact and for my social life. A lot of people now, they get their social life on a screen. They don't leave the house very much. And I hate to see more categories of things that people don't have to leave the house for. And it means that when they don't leave the house on another errand, they're not going to say, hey, I'm going to stop at the corner and have a beer. And so I think it actually does affect on-premise as well.
And if you really want to get into it, when they don't stop there and have that beer, obviously, the Michael Ropers of the world don't get that revenue, but also, and all the ramifications, and then they can't hire somebody in this and that. They also don't talk to the person next to them also having a beer, who for no other reason would they ever have contacting, because they don't have seemingly, interests that are similar enough for them to kind of find themselves online. And you kind of get this people living in different bubbles and thinking that people who think this way and that way are terrible people. But if you actually get to, talk to them in person, maybe you realize that, people who like to do, XYZ aren't terrible, or people who vote for this guy
Right.
aren't
They don't necessarily
inherently
have
bad and
thorns.
stupid. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I don't want to say that Amazon is the root of all evil. I certainly don't believe that, but I do think getting out and talking to people in real life, not people who are curated because they already like the things you like, is probably
It's
a
an
good
unintended
thing.
consequence
Yeah.
of the Amazon revolution. And the Amazon revolution is mostly...
Wait, are they merging? Doug, you've been quiet. Is that why? Is there an NDA?
the Amazon revolution is driven by people's desire to get things for less money. And it's because unlike our parents' and grandparents' generation, we're not making more money. Young people are making less money than their parents, and they don't expect to make more money than their parents. And so if they can save money on a six-pack by ordering on Amazon, maybe they have to, or maybe they don't buy a six-pack. And it's much more complicated than you think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I, just for grins, pulled up, I searched beer on Amazon, and it knows me, so it gave me a bunch of homebrew hoses and things like that. But after that, it showed me Elysian Space Dust IPA, which I can purchase for $11.96 through Amazon Fresh. I have to be 21, which means that I have to sign for it when it shows up, or go to a Whole Foods to pick it up. But yeah, I personally can purchase Anheuser-Busch / Elysian Space Dust IPA, and I presume other beers on Amazon. I don't know why I would, unless if they start adding this was bottled yesterday, I'd be like, huh, that's interesting.
Right.
And I mean, they may very well get there because that's the kind of things that they do. So one of the reasons that I like Amazon is because I find that more than a money saver, I think it's a money loser for me. I buy way more stuff than I would otherwise, but there's things that I would never buy because I would never have the time to go to the store. I just simply wouldn't. I bought a bunch of Oettinger clamps to help cinch beer and CO2 tubing into place, and the little tool to do that. And I would have no idea where to even go to buy such a thing. Maybe the local homebrew shop, but I've never seen one there. And instead I'm like, oh, hey, I could get one of these. Look, it costs $20. Sure, send it over. And 3 days later it shows up, and that's
Or you could go to an online specialty store.
well, how is that better?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean,
It's still as impersonal. I mean, some people have
well,
problems
one
with
thing
Amazon.
you're saying, it's something you cannot buy locally. That's different than something you can or used to be able to buy locally. I mean, what happens now when there's no more homebrew shops? I don't know. I mean, but
But
I
a
can't
homebrew
even
shop
imagine
is
the
like a
people who
blend
are
of
sitting
service
there.
and things, right? Because part of the deal when you're a home brewer is that you're trying to figure out what you're doing. And going to a homebrew shop, you can actually talk to a person and be like, hey, what do I need? What is this? What is that? And that has real added value. So things that still have added value to buy in person where you can talk to someone, those are going to continue to exist. But, things that don't, diapers, for instance, I think it makes a ton of sense to buy your diapers online. I don't need to go to the store to buy diapers.
But,
Yeah, sure.
Like bookstores have been absolutely almost completely annihilated, and people used to go to bookstore for expertise because there were people that worked at bookstores who actually read, and they knew what kind of things you read, and they knew the authors you liked and stuff like that, and they went away because people were able to get reviews and advice online too, and so they just completely supplanted the human element. And I fear for almost every business, every retail business, because Amazon is that powerful. And Amazon has just entered several countries in Europe, and Europe is the land of small shopkeepers, and I hate to see all the empty storefronts that will inevitably happen.
Yeah. I know there was. I think. Well, it's certainly beyond any of our control, but I wanted to.
We can all vote with our feet and our wallets if we want to.
True.
Not our feet so much online. But
Your fingers.
Yes. All right. You know what? We actually are going to at some point have to take a second quick break because we have a handwritten letter that Ed left for me upstairs, so I have to go run and get it. But I wanted to kind of move on a little bit and talk about we got a there was the did you guys read the article in Ad Age about the take craft back campaign and the future of beer from what was it, head of marketing from or no, the president of 10th and Blake? Nobody read that? Okay, cool.
I saw it and wanted to read it, but I was starting to be crunched for time, and you had sent out down in the bottom of the notes a yeast article that I thought was more interesting, so I started reading that one instead.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that, or?
I mean, the one that I got into was just the NPR piece about sour beers and how yeast is the most studied organism in existence, and the thing is, it's all Saccharomyces cerevisiae that's been studied, and now that brewers are getting into trying to make things that are other than just plain old vanilla Saccharomyces, that now there's all this incentive to study some of these other, strains, be it different species or genuses of yeast, and that there are some scientists who are very excited about this because they're going to start to study, a bit more diversity in an extremely well-known organism. And to me, that was a little bit more, if not timely, then compelling and interesting than, what was the other thing you said?
Yeah, exactly. Well, what? Not to completely negate that, we will get to that topic at some point. I was hoping to have maybe Adi from Omega Yeast Labs when we talked.
You don't just want to be wearing the Omega Yeast Lab T-shirt.
Exactly.
Can't you just sit in for him when you got that thing on?
Yeah, exactly. Well, one of the things that this gentleman from 10th and Blake, which was Pete Marino from Miller Coors, and he's the head of I guess their version of the high end, and he was essentially saying that there were a few things he said. They said, well, what do you think about this whole take craft back thing? And one of his answers was, I've never had more craft breweries reaching out to me about partnering up and using our facilities and leverage and everything and channels for distribution and stuff like that. So, I don't think it's fair to say that, this is a strictly predator-prey thing. Oh, we got something going on. We have like a little open mic night or something.
Comedy show, I believe, on the
comedy show.
Sphere.
Yeah.
Well, we're not very funny, so.
Yeah, there you are. Actually cheering for us. The other thing that Mr. Marino said, or another thing that he said, was he didn't want to see the winification of beer. And, that means different things to different people. I've talked about that term, and to me, it doesn't quite
Wouldn't
mean...
it be a vinification?
Yeah, fine. No, I don't think that it is, because that means something about the...
I know.
Yeah.
I teach.
So, what he's saying is there are too many choices. It's analysis paralysis for shoppers, that they walk down the aisle and they are just bombarded by just choices, and what that will mean is they will kind of just, their eyes will glaze over, and they will start doing what people do for wine, which is saying, give me a $10 Merlot, or I want a $15 Malbec, or something like that, where they're saying like, all right, just give me a hazy IPA, something like that, rather than connecting to brands, which obviously somebody who in his shoes wants you to connect to a brand. Somebody maybe like Michael and I, that isn't, it's good, but it's not vital. We can always have the beer equivalent of a $10 Merlot for somebody, and we do. We always have the X, Y, or Z. We always have the easygoing pale. We always have the stout or something. So, but for someone like Doug, I would imagine, people really disassociating quality from brand. For the most part, you're always going to have certain, experts or kind of high-end consumers who do care about that. I mean, does that worry you that people are just really just care about style and there's just too much. I don't know. Every time I come in, it looks completely different.
Right. Just give me an IPA.
Just I look at what Amazon's rated the highest, and then I have it sent to me via Amazon Fresh. Anything? No.
I guess that's more of a challenge in not your home market. It's pretty easy to get around that with like here in Chicago with the kind of brand and familiarity we've built up here. But you can kind of get stuck in that world. With the farther away you get from home, that's certainly a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Just because they don't know who you are and they don't have any
and they're not
personal connection to you,
and they're not really seeing you anywhere other than on the shelf. Well, for most craft breweries, you don't have much of a presence elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that the fact that there are more options now just kind of makes it more, you just kind of blend into the background more than, when a new brewery came to market, 5 years ago, it was a huge deal. 3 years ago, it was a pretty big deal,
Now you don't even hear about it. I mean, you presumably do, but I don't.
I remember 18 months ago, maybe a little bit more, Sun King. I don't want to, throw anyone under the bus. Sun King makes great beers. They've won so many medals, and they were supposed to come to the Chicago market just around 2 years ago, and there was buzz about the idea of them coming. Like, ooh, wow, Sun King, okay. Now, recently, they did come, and, it was just like crickets chirping. Like, nobody interested on the consumer side. That's extreme, saying nobody. I'm sure there were. But, it wasn't like people were asking, when's it dropping? Is it this week? Is it next week? I've heard. And it's, yeah.
I was going to say, I think some of that has to do with the shift from I feel like I'm repeating something I've already said on the show, but like
it's okay. I do it every week.
A shift from needing something new every day to getting burned enough times, plus the overwhelming options on the shelf, that more people are going back to their reliable 3 or 4 breweries. I use the term the breweries that are in your orbit. There's never just one these days, especially in Chicago, but a lot of people have the 4, 5, or 6 that they tend to seek out and get intrigued when something new drops from one of those few, and they're not always just the big ones. Like for me, one of those is Maplewood. I live two blocks from their brewery, and I love those guys, and so whenever they put out something new, it's just something I always like to grab, and I always use the phrase they're in my orbit. But yeah, I mean that's a big reason. I think a lot of these new breweries coming into town that have great reputations. It's just like people kind of have settled in more so on their reliable few, and are doing less exploring these days than they were 2 to 3 years ago, maybe.
I say a lot of the ones that have come in lately, I just say like you're a little late to the party, and imagine like a good example is Odell.
I was thinking Odell just now when you were talking.
They make pretty good beer, but they came to town. They tried to do events around town, and they don't have much presence here. They probably won't have much presence here.
Yeah.
Even
the events that they did, the consumers have seen that same rollout technique 3 or 4 times in the past year or two. So they've seen, oh, you're doing a tap takeover here, you're doing it this here, you're doing a talk there, you're going to be pouring at this grocery store. Oh, everything to me is exactly the same, except you were wearing a different hat. But you still were, a 20-something guy with a hat, and, it was just like, it's all the same to them, and you still had an IPA and a this and a that. I can see how that could all just kind of blend in, like this guy from 10th and Blake is saying.
Look at Shorts. There was a lot of build-up of demand, seemingly, but the brand just died in the market. I mean, it was because they didn't come here on time. They waited too long. I wonder if New Glarus actually did come into our market. I think even they would be too late to the party.
You don't think Spotted Cow would make a splash?
It would make a little splash for about 6 months. And then
Okay.
I think it would be just another beer on the shelf.
Yeah, probably.
I've wondered that about like Yingling. You know, Yingling just came to Indiana, so they're now one state away. What that would be like here?
How are they doing? I know a couple of years when they came to Ohio,
It's so
they
new.
did.
It's
They
like-
did.
They doubled their brewing output in a month, which is just crazy. Because it's not like they doubled off
when they went
100
to
barrels.
Ohio, you're talking about?
Yeah. They started brewing twice as much beer off of a base of like hundreds of thousands of barrels.
And
Like,
even in Cleveland, the home of Great Lakes Brewing, that it really was something that Great Lakes had to take seriously. That it was people were going for Yingling, and they were this slow moving glacial behemoth that was just slowly inching forward. I'm curious. I don't know. I don't know if anyone would care.
I think if
for
Yingling came
Yuengling.
here, it would be a big deal. I know a number of people who
For
are
how long though? To kind of make
No, I know a
start?
number of people who are not into beer who
Well, yeah.
who will always be asking me about Yingling, and if it came here, they'd be buying it all the time.
That's their audience, though,
Right,
because it's not an interesting product, really.
right. It's like a perfectly fine beer, but that's not the entire point of it. It's more the Coors thing. It's like, oh man, you got Coors, you brought back Coors, and then when Coors started to be distributed here, then that obviously that luster wore off. But a lot of people are still talking about Yingling. I don't hear people talking about New Glarus in that way as much, although still occasionally.
I hear that way more, but I guess I travel in different circles. Maybe I don't know. It's
People ask me for New Glarus. Nobody's ever asked me for Yingling.
yeah. I mean, people ask me for not recently though. People ask for New Glarus, but I think Yingling is just a different thing. Do you think that they would make a big splash if they came here, Doug?
I mean, not like they would have 5 years ago. But yeah, their pricing is good. I mean, you can get a $8.99 12-pack of bottles. That's one of the better $8.99 12-packs
Green
of
bottles.
bottles that you'll find
Green bottles.
for that.
and
for
they're
that
the
price.
oldest
So,
brewery in the United States. They're coming up on their bicentennial.
Yeah, there is also that. They're they are well.
They are a legitimate heritage brewery.
So is August Shell, and that doesn't help them at all.
I really like August Shell's beer.
And I don't know if
I
they
think it
play
is pretty good.
Play it the same. They don't play it up as much. I mean, it says America's oldest brewery right at the top. I think it's the first thing going top to bottom on the label. So
I think it's fascinating how big they are, being number one, and how few states they're even in. They're not even in. I don't know how many, maybe 10 at the most.
and how they bucked the trend. They when craft was exploding and the regional breweries, the regional lager breweries were dying. They were just slowly kind of keeping on, and a lot of other regional lager breweries started doing. They were doing contract. They were contracting some of their capacity out, and I know one of the owners and founders of Brooklyn Brewing went to Yuengling and said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing that?" And they said, "No, that's kind of not on our horizon. That doesn't fit with what we want to do." And at the time, I forget the guy's name, but he said,
Steve Hindy, or
yeah, Steve Hindy. He was like, "Okay, well, have fun going out of business because this is where it's going." And he said in his book, like, boy, was I wrong. But they were also the exception that kind of proved the rule. I mean, nobody else has kind of been able to do that.
They were the last man standing. I mean, look at all the other brands like Blatz and Stroh's and Schlitz. They all went under.
Besides them and August Shell, I mean, Leinenkugel's is owned by Miller, but does still exist. But Yuengling and August Shell are the only two that I can think of that are existent brands that are not one of the big three big two, I guess, depending on how you want to look at it.
Is Point owned by somebody?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know.
I'm not positive, but I think so.
They're owned by some kind of equity partners.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and I guess, you know, if Point is still an independent brewery that's been around forever, I don't know the history of Point, then it doesn't, I guess, necessarily matter who you're owned by. But it's just that those regional breweries, like, mostly went away. And Yuengling is
Right.
the king of craft now that they're allowed to be in the club, right?
Well, the other thing, just getting back to this article that Mr. Marino said was that, you know, going forward or more and more is that marketing is going to be the most important thing to all beer, including craft. It certainly isn't to kind of, you know, refute what some of the high-end brewers say. It isn't all what's in the glass. It is what, you know, the high end really is about, which is marketing and branding, and that's going to be key, because he said you're going to have so much choice, you're going to have so much quality that even if you have two beers that are exactly the same, they're two good beers, which one are consumers going to go to? And it's the one that has a compelling story or, you know, some sort of marketing that they can kind of resonate. Yeah.
So, you know, I'm sure that most of you probably saw that Ballast Point had commercials during the World Series.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, are you kidding? It's like,
Yeah.
I was blown away.
So
by
many
it.
things about that blew me away. And we've again, this is what I'm saying over. I'm like a broken record on the show. We've talked about it on the show a little bit before. But so many things were weird about that, or just surprising. One, that it just was there. But if you think about it, it makes sense. They're bought for $1 billion. You know, $1 billion brands can have World Series commercials. The other thing was that it was referencing rate beer ratings. So I mean, you know, talking about 97 out of 100 on rate beer, and you know, it's. I guess, you know, now Rate Beer is starting to get some, you know, influx of some capital. They're licensing
ZX
that out.
Ventures, baby.
And yeah, man, ZX is like, you know what you should be doing? You should be selling your, you know, but yeah, I mean, to me, I don't think anyone that they were shooting for, they hoped knew about Rate Beer. I just think they probably thought, oh, 97, people know the Robert Parker scale. They know that 97 is close to 100, and that means that one expert, probably in their mind, one expert or a panel of experts rated this as a 97, not a bunch of, you know, anonymous who knows. Not to, hey, and Sculpin's a good beer.
It is.
Yeah.
I like it.
I like it.
I drink it sometimes.
I haven't lately, but I'm having freshness issues in this market with that beer, but I do like it. And I've talked about how much I love that beer on this show. All right, why don't we take another quick, can we do like maybe another 60 seconds or let's take a minute or two maybe. I got to go run and find I have to run and find a letter. Whoa, wait, see, we almost had a flawless show, John, but you had to go and do that. I threw a wrench, which is fine. I'll give you this one, but I have to go find a handwritten letter that Ed texted me where it exists. I guarantee you that Ed won't be crashing the show this week because he's in Palm Springs, but he has a letter that he claims is up there. So I'm going to go grab it, take a look, and then if I can actually find it, then we'll read it when I come back with more of the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. So long. I have in my hand here a letter. To me, that bit never gets old. The old Ira Glass, you know, crumpling. Whenever he has something in his hand, he has to crumple something, presumably what he's talking about in his hand, to make you know, realize that it's really there. Steve, could you do me a favor? Could you shut that door behind you, Steve? Thank you. I don't want to hear the guy epically bombing at the stand-up thing. That's not fair. I mean, he is, but we don't have to call him out for it. But I kind of do. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Anyway, we have a real handwritten letter, if all the way from sunny Portland, Oregon, and it was there. I will mention that it was addressed to the Co-Prosperity Sphere, and let me say, if you want to write a letter, you should address it to the Co-Prosperity Sphere or Lumpen Radio or the Beer Temple, and it's 3219 South Morgan Street in Bridgeport, Chicago, Illinois 60608. This was sent by Mr. Jeff Weiser, and he sent it to Co-Prosperity Sphere attention Chris Quinn, yet Edmar just opened it up. Edmar, who is known for losing letters.
That's illegal.
Yeah, it's illegal. And you know what? I'm thinking about pressing charges. Anyway, Mr. Weiser writes, Dear Insiders, I'm writing you for two reasons. First, Chris's constant pleas for letters is both sad and entertaining. Hey, wait, where is this letter going? This letter will perhaps bring him joy, but also diminish his claims that, quote, no one writes letters anymore. Life is full of conflicts. The second reason, I don't know if I should read this. Anyway, the second reason is that I've come to a recent conclusion that any IPAs just don't do it for me. Now, before you roll your eyes and claim, quote, personal preference, hear me out. Here in Portland, Oregon, there are some damn fine breweries making good any IPAs. A few stand out, and then parentheses, Great Notion, Breakside, and others. But my rub is that aside from the true standout examples, the vast majority taste the same, or at least similar enough for me to lose interest quickly. That doesn't make them bad, it just makes them less distinct. Standard IPAs seem to have far more variance and maybe even nuance, resulting in a broader spectrum of, quote, personality or, quote, profiles. Pine Bombs, tropically hopped IPAs, and more malty/caramely IPAs all taste distinct. I have not found that range with any IPAs, and just maybe it's that, quote, range that helps make standard IPA so popular. There's a profile for many different drinking tastes. Regionality plays a role here too. Quote, Northwest, San Diego, Midwest, etc., end quote, end parens. This was too long, my hand hurts, but I did it for you, Chris. Cheers. Jeff Weiser, PDX. Thanks, Jeff. That was very nice of you. I'm going to hold on to this. Started out, I didn't know where it was going. It was a little chat roomy, for my tastes, but that's fine.
Initially, I thought you were saying any, like A-N-Y, any IPA. Like he didn't like any IPAs, but you're specifically, it was
NEIPA.
The two letters, New England style IPAs.
Yeah, I should probably have been a little bit more distinct. But thank you for writing the letter. I do want to mention that if you want to write a digital letter, you can also do that. You mail it to insiders at craftbeertemple.com. I also get those letters, and I had one lined up just in case this so-called handwritten letter didn't materialize. But thank you, Jeff. And any thoughts about that? Do you think that it's these NEIPAs are limited in that they are by necessity quite similar from one another?
You missed it because you were here, but there was a 16 beer blind tasting at the Beer Temple bar that the Chicago Beer Society ran for First Thursday. It was all New England style IPAs. About half were from New England, half from the Chicago area, all within 2 or 3 weeks old, something like this. And there definitely was a pretty good size range of flavors and everything else. Still not
splitting hairs. You were like, I would consider this this type of any IPA. I would consider that one that type.
Yeah, I mean, like, was the range as wide as the IPA style generally? Probably not. But on the other hand, Northeast IPAs are something that people have been experimenting with for what, like a year or two.
Well,
an IPA is more like 10 or 20. So it's not surprising that there's a bigger range.
Well, you did a blind tasting several months back of Goose. Similar. Would you say that there was a broader range than there was for the Goose blind tasting? Because then again, I mean, you are, I think, to most people, splitting hairs.
I mean, I think that they were similar in that all the beers tasted somewhat alike but had distinct differences. I mean, I liked the Goose one better because you don't drink Gooses that much, and a lot of them were pretty interesting. But, I mean, there certainly was a range to the Northeast IPAs. I mean, it wasn't like these all taste the same. It definitely wasn't like that. Mm-hmm. Not in my opinion.
So who won, by the way?
There was some confusion about that. If you just went by most first and second places, it was Hailstorm actually down in Tinley. But if you went by everyone's agglomerated like rating score, everyone had to go 0 to 10 stars or whatever. Then it was Hill Farmstead.
Okay, interesting. Any thoughts for you, Doug? No thoughts at all. That's okay.
I kind of used up all this topic in my what am I drinking lately?
Yeah.
Okay, there you are. That's fair. How about you, Michael? Anything? Nothing. This man takes the time to write a letter.
What do you think? You didn't weigh in.
No, why you got to go there? No. I think there's a couple different. I think there's ones that are the more juicy style. I think there are some that are, more of just kind of the hazy. I do think that there are. The one thing I definitely do agree with is that there are standout examples. And that after that, in my mind, they all kind of get just jumbled into and the rest.
Well, almost all of them aren't bitter. So that's a major thing. And if you're the type of drinker who relies on a decent amount of bitterness on the back end to clip things off, help you taste, etc., then I could see where it'd be like, I don't know, these all just kind of taste like hops and then nothing. I mean, I could see that, but within the hops that they taste like, there's the range is definitely there, But
I will weigh on now, because I did a tasting event last week with a group of 42 people, and
Wow.
We did some comparisons, and we had side by sides and stuff, and you have to realize that every individual has a very different palate, and they have a different range of things that they find acceptable, they find good, that they can even taste. So
Sure.
Perhaps Mr. Weiser has a very unique palate, and there are things that we might taste that he can't taste, and vice versa, things that he can taste that we can't. And so a lot of times we do these tastings, and I tell people to raise their hands if you tasted this. And something that I find unbelievably obvious in the taste profile of this beer, 10 people in the room said, I didn't taste that at all.
Right.
And
to you, it's like all you can focus on.
Right, it's like the main thing, and other people are like, I don't really see it.
And so that's why it is very personally subjective, and a lot of people do or do not taste things that I do, and we don't taste things that he does. And I think for some people, a lot of beers that I find have a fantastic range of flavors seem very one-dimensional to somebody else. And vice versa. There are some beers and wines and whiskeys and ciders that I find very one-dimensional that somebody can wax rhapsodically about for hours about the complexities that these things have. And, and in some ways, that's the wonderful thing about
Sure.
variety.
Yeah, absolutely. Fair enough.
Yeah, I think if I hadn't had this recent experience with all the Northeast IPAs, and I say blind, but I mean we could see them, we just didn't know what brand they were or whatever. But it is a style that there are a lot of similarities between most of the ones that are good anyway. One of the things that was funny in this tasting was that there was one beer that was a total outlier that everyone rated like terribly. Like most of the beers clustered in the 6s and 7s, and I think there was a couple that lagged into the 5s, and then there was one like 3, where everyone was just like, ooh, this is pretty bad. It's like, I don't know if the hops had gone rancid or what, but it was, most people were unhappy. And I think Michael is definitely right that different people perceive different things to an extent that is sometimes bordering on unbelievable, and so regular IPAs, yes, there's a lot more range. Northeast IPAs, it would be not entirely wrong to say that these all taste kind of similar, except for the ones that are really gross or
It's
whatever.
like a Belgian IPA. I guess you could say the same thing for,
But if you sit down and drink 8 or 10 of them all right next to each other, you'll notice differences.
Right.
And I mean, when we get into drinking beer or trying anything, right? It's like you at first, like, let's say you give a sour beer to a person who's never had a sour beer, they're like, whoa, this is sour. And then you give them another sour beer, they're like, I don't know, this one's sour too. But as you get used to certain flavors and you start to like kind of filter those out, they become the normal background. That's when you start to notice the nuances. That's why people who drink a lot of beer and think about and taste different beers, they take all the beer flavor and strip it away, and they say, oh yeah, it tastes like this and that and the other. And then you give it to a person who doesn't drink beer. You give it to my mother, and she says, it tastes like beer. And you're like, well, yeah, but like that's not,
Yeah, no, I think you're completely right. And there also has to be some sort of like ingrained like flavor memory too to kind of call upon. Like what the base is going to be like, and you have that kind of reference point, which I think is exactly what you're saying, and then you can kind of build on that.
Is there an official definition of what makes something a New England IPA versus like a double dry hopped IPA?
I think it's based on average number of bottle caps it gets on tap.
I was going to say that it has to do with the turbidity.
I was going to say how opaque it is.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think it's how hazy it is. But
like
no.
I've heard people say, like, it's to be a New England IPA, it can't use crystal malts. It doesn't have the bitter back.
Well, the question is, does Heady Topper count as a New England IPA?
I mean, to me, I think it's
the progenitor and yet a different style.
I say no.
You're right.
It doesn't taste like any of the others.
I say no.
Why do you guys say no?
It's relatively clear in comparison to everything else you're seeing that develops that category into a name like that. It's very bitter. It's like at the top toward the top of the IBU meter, which seems to go against everything that all these others are. So I don't consider it one.
It sort of predates the movement, the New England IPA movement. Mm-hmm. And to me, Heady Topper tastes kind of West Coast.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I would say yes, it is. I remember when people were first talking about it, they were talking about how, you have to drink it out of the can because it's got all this like chunks of stuff floating in it, and it's all hazy and weird looking and stuff like that.
It's more for the aromatics is why they tell you to do that, though.
I'm not saying that is why they tell you to do it. I'm just saying what people were saying why. Like, they would bring up that the appearance of the beer was not up to par with, the best, examples of the
right.
IPA
It's
style.
not crystal clear.
Yes. And I distinctly remember that. So at the time, it was, the first beer I remember where it was like, oh yeah, the appearance being, not acceptable from the, the BJCP. You go down, or even Beer Advocate. You look at the appearance, and maybe the appearance, it would not get a lot of good points for that or something. It's the first one I remember people talking about that way.
But I mean, would you call Sierra Celebration a West Coast IPA? Because it is maybe one of the first West Coast IPAs, and yet I don't think it fits neatly into that style category.
Sure. I mean, would you consider so if Pilsner Urquell didn't exist and then it came onto the scene,
Literally means
would it
original
be,
Pilsner.
Right. Would it be considered a Pilsner? You know, probably not, because it has, you know, fresh, it's too bitter and it's got too much toasted malt character to it, and it's got some diacetyl in it, and it's not a Pilsner. This isn't a Pilsner. This is some other kind of lager. And the reality is it's the first. And, you know, I've got a Baltic Porter, Carnegie Baltic Porter from Sweden is one of the first Baltic Porters ever. It's like 5.5%, and it tastes like a Dunkel. And, it really tastes like a Dunkel. And it would not be considered at all a Baltic Porter. And if you look at BJCP, they have all these outliers to allow for this beer because you can't say it isn't a Baltic Porter. And they do the same exact thing for Pilsner Urquell.
It'll be very interesting to see.
And I think it's the same for Hetty.
When they make a Northeast IPA style, will they grandfather the guidelines such that Hetty will count?
Well, I mean, according to Michael and Doug, they shouldn't, because it's kind of spawned independent of it.
I'm with Michael and Doug. I agree with them.
Okay, well then I'm the outlier. It's fine. It's okay. I've been
Wrong.
I've been surrounded by people who are wrong before, and I just keep on being right. It doesn't affect me. No, I mean, in the end,
we're not forming a lynch mob.
Yeah,
the real question is, what will Margaret think? I think she's the final authority on this.
Yeah. She'll think we should change topics. We are pretty much out of time, guys. I've had a lot of fun. Thank you all for joining me. I wanted to take the last few minutes to let you guys just bring up anything that you wanted to talk about. Yeah, that's about it. Does anyone want to go first? Doug?
Sure. I don't think I've plugged my Instagram account since the first time I was on the show. I've been trying to get back into my beer photography hobby lately, and I've been a little more active on there. So I've been posting some, trying to take some fun pictures, doing some cool edits. That's at Beer Aficionado on Instagram, and then we're just ramping up at Revolution for the barrel aged can release, which is going to be a 2-day party, Friday night and all day Saturday. Not this coming weekend, but next, the 17th and 18th.
Ticketed or just show up?
Just show up. Two different. We have two parts to the building. One part will be package sales. The other part will be the release party with all the special draft variants and all that. We did a second day to give the people from the suburbs a chance to come and to kind of spread out the crowds and thin it out a little bit by doing it over 2 days. And
allow the people from the city to get out before the icky suburbanites come in. You know, let's be real.
True.
I will say that if the other 7 variants from the Café Deeth are of equal quality, then I mean this is going to be, to me, one for the ages. I mean, if they're all, I honestly don't think it's possible that they're all going to be as good. But if they are, it's going to be legendary. So I'm personally now, after having Café Deeth, very excited to try the rest. How about you, Steve? Anything you want to close with?
I usually do some kind of event, and nothing really jumps to mind. I did hear the underwriting for Krampus Knock or something like that that's happening here at the Co-Prosperity Sphere, so I think that'll be fun, and I'll try to make it out. I'll have to see what's going on my calendar. But you can always, if you're bored on Saturday at 4 p.m., beer download on Lumpen Radio here, the sister beer radio show. So check it out if you're inclined.
It's a good idea. So is it going to cut into your Fobab time this weekend then? We didn't even mention that Fobab is this weekend, yeah. Which is the festival of barrel-aged beers. I talked to a guy on Monday who is in from Australia, and he came to Chicago
To do Fobab.
because of Fobab.
I mean,
That's intense.
Fobab is pretty epic. So much so that if it's the first time you're going and there's even a sliver of a chance that you'll lose control, like you're done. Like plan on just being like passed out on the floor somewhere, because it's there's so much stuff that's so fun to drink, but
it's all really strong.
yeah. Fobab will need. I think we probably won't be live unless we get bored at Fobab and just wander over to the studio to record. We'll probably rebroadcast last week or something.
Cool. And Michael?
Well, I can't plug it in a way that I want people to come, but we're sort of doing a post-Fobab event on Sunday with Lauren Salazar, who has brought a bunch of single fooder beers to Chicago, and we're going to do a blending seminar. Unfortunately, this
Wow.
event sold out like absolutely instantly. So actually,
I wonder why.
So nobody else can come to this event. But I have to say that I am, we've actually done this once before, and it was absolutely revealing. Those who aren't familiar
I think
with
I was there when you did it last time.
You might
with
have.
Eric.
yeah,
It was awesome.
Lauren has a palate like very few people
Yeah.
have. I
She
mean,
is. I always refer to her as the deep sniffer, because my first encounter with her was at the World Beer Cup in 2010, and she was a judge, and she would put her hand over the glass.
And you didn't know who
then
she
just-
was, right?
Right?
You
No,
told me.
no idea. She was just this woman who would put her hand over the glass, kind of stir it up, put her nose up there, and it was like so intense you could like hear it across the room. Her like inhaling in this like massive way, and then she would like take any bitsy sip, and then she would like expound on. It was interesting to watch.
yeah, it's going to be fantastic. And so while I can't really plug it because we can't sell any more tickets to it,
And also because this is a community radio and you're not allowed to have
I'm not
calls
allowed
to action.
I'm not allowed to do a call.
But you can
to-
mention anything that's going on. You just can't tell people to.
If you
go to
were
it.
super cool
But
and
I-
got tickets 2 months ago, you could
I would
come.
say a year from now or two years from now, you might look on our website and you might see that we're doing another such event, and you might be interested.
Yeah, there you are. That's fair enough. For me, I would say thanks, guys. If you see me at Fobab, I learned my lesson last year. I judged all day Friday, and then I went to the Friday night session just to kind of get my Fobab done with, so I didn't have to come back the next day. I was very tired, and I got slammed on, it was either Yelp or iTunes, because I wasn't friendly enough to somebody when they came up and talked to me. So if that's you can come up and talk to me, and I'll try to be fresh as a daisy, and I'll talk to everyone there. And if I have to go and talk to somebody else or just want to go do something, I will try to be very polite and make it very obvious that I am doing it. So if you see me at Fobab, by all means, pat me on the back or give me a high five or something like that. And
Or say you were mean to me last year. I don't even want to talk to you.
yes. And the other thing, feel free to ask me what beers I've been enjoying, because that seems to be the most popular question that I am asked, which makes sense.
It's the icebreaker at a beer event. To be
What's
fair.
your favorite beer?
Yeah. That's about it. I wanted to thank all my guests, Doug, Steve, and Michael. And I want to thank you guys. And I want to thank Jeff Weiser for writing a letter. We always say that the best way to get the word out is word of mouth. So why don't you let someone know about this show if you think they'd like it this week. That's about it. We got to go. So long till next week. Bye.
Remember